This is Nerd World Problems, things that matter to awesome people. Timelash and Twin Dilemma usually end up battling for last place in the polls. Whilst the Twin Dilemma is something of a triumph over adversity, with some good ideas, Timelash doesn't have the benefit of that doubt. The script is, in a word, awful. Glenn McCoy was an experienced writer, but he was not a Doctor Who writer. The whole approach strikes me as mishandled. When this arrived on Eric Saywood's desk, it's a miracle it didn't kill him. It reads like a radio play, all dialogue-led and conceived from the mind of a viewer with some writing experience. Instead of relying on past continuity, again, Timelash invents its own, heavily referencing an off-screen Third Doctor adventure. Aside from Vengeance on Varys, there isn't another story in this season that doesn't rely on fetishising the past in some way, be it through continuity, fan service, or just making stuff up. Constantly looking backwards instead of forwards so persistently is really distracting by this point, and it serves only to nudge our current lead out of the spotlight. Is it any wonder the Sixth Doctor had to be so loud? I bear no ill will to Glenn McCoy. It would be ludicrous to think he intended to write a bad script. But bottom line was, he was an inexperienced writer for Doctor Who. He had only written a couple of episodes of medical drama Angels prior to landing Doctor Who. The fact that his first draft of the script was full of Daleks must have been a concern in terms of a writer's perception of Doctor Who. Story goes that Saywood asked McCoy to resubmit without the Daleks, which he did. So either the script was dependent on the Daleks to elevate the material, or it just wasn't that great to begin with, and the Daleks being in it diverted attention from other issues. One such issue being that the scripts were too short, requiring additional material to be hastily added to the script, most of it in the TARDIS during the recording block for the next story, which means there is a lot of nonsensical waffle and padding between the Doctor and Peri in the early scenes of the story. Many sins are also committed in the final part, and I mean the multiple endings. It just doesn't know when to quit. The Borad, the main antagonist of the story, is defeated. But then the Bandrels have launched a missile at Carfel that they cannot be bothered to stop. The Doctor then has to throw the TARDIS into its path to blow it up, which should destroy the TARDIS. However, it returns to Carfel with no explanation and without a scratch. Then, a clone of the Borad appears, only to be immediately got rid of in the Timelash. So what was the point? In between all these scenes are many rambling, padding scenes in the TARDIS, just to take any urgency out of the situation. Perhaps if the material of this story had been condensed into a singular episode, a nice break of pace after the very long Two Doctors, its resources could have been concentrated into something a lot more positive. But what went so wrong that McCoy was able to submit a script so far off the mark? I suppose, looking at the positives, it's a more traditional Doctor Who story, which is in some ways a refreshing change, but the absence of any of the challenging ideas of recent stories just doesn't make what's going on interesting. Yes, recent stories have perhaps been aimed at a more mature viewership, and this is an attempt to revert to the classical style story. But that manifests itself in clichés and some really ropey visuals that would barely be passable in the Hartnell era. There is a story and an idea in there somewhere, and ambition by the bucket load, but the execution is very, very poor. Sadly, there is little else in the production to detract from the story's shortcomings. Having spent much of the budget on jollying to Spain, Timelash doesn't look great. No, it looks awful. This, I imagine, may have been the final straw for some viewers. It fulfills every cliché imaginable about Doctor Who. The Bandrels are pretty much inanimate puppets, and the titular Timelash is full of tinsel. And whilst I appreciate the production team were trying to do their best with what little they had, little is done to disguise the fact that they are making props with tinsel. Even the morals are reprehensible. Just listen to what the Doctor says as he throws the Borad into the Timelash. Nobody likes you, Borad. Nobody cares, because you're different and not like everyone else. What is happening? If it was either poor production values or a poor script, one could forgive the other. But with both so badly lacking, it is a challenge to find something positive in this story. But I'm going to try. The Borad, the main antagonist, is actually very well realised. Whilst the writing behind him is poor, the makeup and the performance by Robert Ashby is impressive. For a story where the sets are so plain and drab, the Borad's lair actually looks pretty good, if a little sparse. The lighting is excellent and gives the story some much needed atmosphere. And that's about it. Well, the only other positive is Paul Darrow. Paul Darrow pitches this perfectly, in that he almost completely takes the piss. But you know what? He's the most entertaining thing in it. I have voluntarily watched this story before now, just to see Paul Darrow having the time of his life gate-crashing Colin Baker's show, just as he had done in Blake 7 several years earlier. Speaking of which, this is the second consecutive story to feature a guest actor from Blake 7. Colin Baker does his utmost to hold this together. In the hands of a less skilled actor, this story could have been utterly unwatchable. Perry, on the other hand, is chained up for most of the story and does sod all, which is quite a waste considering it looked like we were making progress. Given that we had this underrunning story, this would have been the perfect time to put in some more character stuff, more than just argumentative fluff. David Chandler as H.G. Wells. He brings a lot of enthusiasm to the role, but Christ, he's like Adric's cousin with ADHD and delusions of grandeur. I get that he's trying to do CPR to a pretty much lifeless script and character, but it's almost criminal that H.G. Wells is so irritating that he's almost unlikable. Not only that, but the Doctor meeting H.G. Wells has been pissed away on this story. And as a result, any future appearance of H.G. Wells in Doctor Who will be inexorably linked to this story and paradoxically reduce the chances of any future appearance ever. The only positive to come from this is that H.G. Wells' excitement leads to a lot of humorous reactionary moments from the Doctor. What is also really annoying is that this is another one of those stories where the Doctor meets a historic writer and ends up going on an adventure just like their stories, which, unless done really cleverly, is rarely credible. J.K. Rowling has, as far as we know, not had any encounters with wizards or fantastic beasts, and J.R.R. Tolkien didn't go on a mission to throw dangerous jewellery into a volcano aided by lots of mythical creatures. It usually ends up copping out in one of two ways. Either the circumstances surrounding them are contrived based on the antagonist's knowledge of their work, or their work was inspired by the events of the adventure. Both are pretty dull, but the latter can border on the offensive. It is sort of reductive to the imaginative genius and inspiration and creativity of some great writers and artists to suggest that some of their great works are more or less retellings of their actual experiences repackaged as fiction, and oh, they came first. In this instance, suggesting that H.G. Wells was inspired by the events of Timelash is a bloody liberty. The only way I can accept this is by lying to myself that this was a different Herbert George Wells. I can see that for the audience watching that may have had concerns over the previous weeks, that this would be considered the last straw, which is a real shame because the next story is a belter. I hope you've enjoyed this episode by episode analysis of the Sixth Doctor. Please let me know your thoughts about the character in the comment section below, and if you want to see more videos like this. In the meantime, please check out my blog, Nerd World Problems, at drtripod.wordpress.com, where you can find typed up versions of each of these episodes.